Microphone check 212. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to It's the Bearded Man podcast with your favorite, the world's favorite bearded man, Bob Bay. Super excited today. The third woman to be on the Bearded Man podcast. We will stop the counter after this because I don't want to seem like I'm sitting here taking note. Wow. Niki Cremmen, what up?
Wow.
And from Massachusetts too.
Yeah.
Two Massachusetts people right here.
It's too much alignment.
How you feel? First podcast, right?
This is my first podcast.
Okay.
And I feel honored to know that I'm the third woman. That's beautiful.
Third woman.
Wow.
I used to, in the old podcast I was telling you about earlier, I used to get people that would, once in a while, people would hit me up and be like, why don't you ever, I'm not going to lie, it was a very male skewing podcast. Not intentionally.
Yeah.
But I would have people hit me up and be like, why don't you have more women? And I would explain like, hey, it's just the people that I've been interested in wanting to talk about. And then I would be like, if you think I'm not trying to have women on the podcast, you're out of your mind. I would rather have women on the podcast every week than actually talk to males for 2 hours a week. So
that is interesting. Yeah, I'm glad that you're incorporating more women.
Yeah. Oh, now it's like I'm making an honest effort.
Yeah, you can make an effort.
I want to make an effort to make sure that I'm providing a platform for both people, male and female. And so I'm just making
There's
sure.
some very influential women out there.
100%.
Yeah.
I want to talk to them.
Yeah, right?
When I see a woman that is driven and just like on her own path, that's the type of woman I want to talk to. I want to understand like what's the mindset? I mean, even for males too, anybody that can just go for something that they want, I'm like, I want to learn more. I want to know why.
Yeah.
Wow, we have so much to talk about today. Mm-hmm. And we're just gonna go with the flow. But I think this first topic is gonna just set where the conversation will go.
Yeah.
You are from Massachusetts. Is it Milford?
Milton.
Damn it. I had it written down too.
Yeah.
Fucked it up. Milton, Mass. You moved out to LA about 6-7 years ago.
Yes. You've done your research.
Oh, you have no idea. That's
wow.
That's what I do.
That's amazing.
I make sure there's work behind the scenes, so I'm not wasting people's time.
Yeah.
So you move out to LA 6-7 years ago. You come out here for college. Mm-hmm. Great idea, obviously, to get away from the East Coast, switch it up, come to LA, and you find yourself. There's one story that caught my attention. Was there was a moment in time you were, I think, on Sunset Boulevard, and a lot of things had led up to this moment on Sunset, and you kind of have like this life realization about like everything. And I kind of want to know backstory up to this moment, because it was this moment that you decided you wanted to get help. I think you walked into a treatment center for eating disorder, which then led into sobriety.
Yes.
So walk me to how and what this moment has meant to you on Sunset.
Wow. I'm just amazed that you brought that moment up, because that is a really pinnacle moment in my life. And it's one of those visuals I can look at and it's just absolutely insane. You can feel it. Yeah, I can feel it. I can feel being there, and most importantly, recognizing how different my life is now from how it was then. And there's a lot that led up to that moment. I mean, I would have to start. I was born. I'm just kidding. Seriously though, it's crazy how everything, it all snowballs. And what really led up to that moment was I got into a lot of pain, internal pain. And that was a result of my relationship with myself that had evolved from the meaning that I derived from all of my life experiences. And the way that I was living my life back then, I cared a lot about what other people thought. And I was self-medicating to cope with the way that I felt. And I didn't know anything different at the time. And the hardest part is with people who struggle with addiction, eating disorders, anything, any self-destructive behavior. I'm so glad that I now have my own understanding of that, because at the time I couldn't understand why I was behaving the way I was behaving. But the reality is I was treating myself terribly. And I was so caught up in so many addictions and self-destructive behaviors And it all led up to that moment. And I just got into so much pain. I was so sick of my own mind, to be honest, sick of my own mind. And I just got to that point where I was like, wow, I cannot believe I'm a 17-year-old girl who is treating herself the way that she's treating herself. And I grew up in an amazing family. You know, we all have our stuff. And
Totally.
It's funny because I look back and I'm like, I thought my childhood was perfect and I have amazing parents, but I did have certain traumas that I was carrying with me. And that's really what I was running from at that time. I was running from my own pain, my own emotions, and finding ways to medicate. And I think a lot of people can relate with that.
Totally.
And so, yeah, at that time, like I said, I got into enough pain to where I was willing to ask for help.
What were some of the traumas that you were running from?
Good question. Honestly, it's strange because I don't know why, you know, my brother and sister went through the same childhood as me, but for some reason, the ideas that I got from it, like deep feelings of unworthiness, you know, I don't think my parents tried to make me feel that way. I don't think other people in my life tried to make me feel that way at all. If anything, they were trying to make me feel the opposite. But for some reason, I got this idea that I wasn't good enough. And I just deeply didn't feel connected to my own sense of worth. And I quickly found ways of finding it outside of me. So I played a lot of sports and I was really good at sports, you know? So it's like cha-ching, all these little dopamine shots along the way of, oh, am I good enough now? Am I good enough now? And so I just started to really, really build my own sense of identity based on all of these things, based on how I thought other people perceived me, if that makes sense. So I think my traumas were a lot of that. It was just a lot, and we're kids. We don't know how to perceive the world. We don't know better.
Yeah.
So the way that I really interpreted life, and there's addiction that runs in my family and certain people in my life who maybe didn't treat themselves that great. And the way that my young mind interpreted that was, oh, well, if they're doing that, that must mean something about me.
Yeah.
And so I just had my own little self-centered way of viewing things, and it ended up making me attach all this meaning to who I am.
Yeah.
And that was really a lot of my trauma. I'm lucky that I didn't go through really crazy, different traumatic things that a lot of people go through. But what I've really found is that it doesn't really matter because it's all relative.
Yeah.
So
yeah, your own story it's so unique to yours that you can't try to compare in the sense of like, this is so hard to approach, but we can sometimes like compare our like childhoods and think like, well, I didn't have it as hard as them, or I had it worse than them, or we try to like have this mental conversation with ourselves about where we grew up or what we were around or who was around. But at the end of the day, it's like your own journey is your own uniqueness. And so it's like, your trauma might be someone else's
luxury.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, you just have to be aware of like, everyone's going to go through their own journey of life.
Oh yeah.
But you can control the way you perceive what your past has been like and where your future is going to be.
Exactly. And I honestly think a lot of people don't give themselves permission to have traumas. They're just like, what do you mean? I grew up so privileged and there's so many other people who have it worse than me, quote unquote. And it's like, I really, really think that it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know, there are people who grow up with nothing in certain parts of the world maybe, and they might have a sense of community that makes them feel loved. Yeah. And that's beautiful. And then there's people who grow up with everything and they don't feel that sense of love. So it's all relative, and I really think it is to be considered for oneself. Like I want to give myself permission to feel and be like, okay, you know, maybe someone else in my family might not have interpreted something the same way as me. I had that experience of like, what do you mean you had trauma around that? Yeah. And I'm like, but I did. Yeah. That's just my truth.
Yeah. We're going to go into so many of like the meditation, like we're going to get into mental health. There's so much that we'll peel back very shortly. But the addictions, was it alcohol? Was there other addiction within family too as well?
Yeah, I mean, alcoholism runs in my family. I never thought I had a problem with drugs or alcohol because I didn't drink all the time. I was a kid. Starting at 13, 14 years old, I just started experimenting with drinking and smoking weed and all that stuff. And I just thought I was a normal kid. And then it just turns out that what alcoholism and addiction really is, I think there's a misinterpretation globally about what it is. Personally, that's what I think. And what I think it is, and what I've learned, is that it's not about how often you use a substance. It's about what happens to you when you use it. And my truth is that when I drink or smoke or take something that makes me feel better or different, there's a part of me that wants more, number one. And there's also a part of me that it has power over me rather than me having power over it. There's a lot of people, and I know that it's very complicated because a lot of people can drink. They can have a few glasses of wine and it's fine. And maybe I could do that a few times. But the reality is I know that I have this part of me that if it makes me feel good, I want more of it.
Totally.
So that was my truth. And I didn't realize it until I went into treatment for the eating disorder. And I went to my first AA meeting, and it was a women's meeting. And
at the AA meeting, it was
all women.
Okay.
All women's AA
I didn't know.
meetings.
Now, is that regular? I didn't know. Like,
they have women's meetings, they have co-ed meetings, all that stuff.
okay.
Yeah. So I went to a women's meeting because a family member of mine has alcoholism, not because I thought I had it. I didn't think I had it at all. I was a 17-year-old kid, and drugs and alcohol I didn't think were the problem. I knew I was the problem. There was something inside of me. I didn't love myself. But the reality was every time I drank, I blacked out. And every time I smoked, I wasn't able to behave as me. Honestly, it cut me off from myself. I did things I wouldn't actually want to do.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, nobody wants to admit that they can't use those things. So it wasn't on the forefront of my mind to think that those things were a problem for me until I went to this AA meeting, and it was a bunch of women in a room, and the topic was self-esteem. And I was just like, what? I thought AA was all about alcohol and, homeless people with brown paper bags. And they were just talking about this idea of self-esteem. And there's so much we could go into around that. I could tell you later, but I'm not sure how there are that many people who aren't in AA who realize that AA is a spiritual program. It's literally the 12 steps are designed for you to have a spiritual awakening. Literally, that's the point. So you're taking an addict or an alcoholic and you're saying, to save your life, this person must awaken spiritually.
Wow.
It's actually insane. Wow. A lot of people do not realize that.
Yeah.
Because when a person is an addict or an alcoholic, there's something that they're running from inside of themselves. They're using something to medicate.
Yeah.
So instead of looking at that person and saying, what's wrong with you? Just stop doing that. It's not that easy.
Yeah.
And the whole point is that if a person could just stop doing whatever they're addicted to, they would have just stopped already.
Yeah.
And that's why I found so much compassion for myself, because I realized I had a condition. And the condition is that these things I'm addicted to have power over me.
Yeah.
If I could have used my self-will, if I could have just mustered up enough strength to stop doing those things, I would have done it already.
Yeah.
And it just allowed me to have so much compassion for myself, to realize that I had that condition, and to realize that there are so many people in the world who also struggle with that, and they don't even know it.
Yeah.
And that's been one of my biggest passions, is when I meet someone who feels terrible about themselves, or they're depleted, or they're like, why can't I just change? And I get to look at them and say, me too. And I get to look at them and say, I used to feel that same way. And the only way I was able to really change my behavior was to learn to love myself from the inside out, which we can get to.
Wow. Wow. This is juicy. So a couple things. One, outside looking in, I would have thought was just how and why people are addicted to alcohol, and just talking about it, and just that's what it is for. Mm-hmm. But when you're breaking it down, it's like more of a spiritual awakening, and there's like a 12-step program. It makes so much more sense to me, and I love that. I think I have alcoholism in my family. Mm-hmm. I have definitely had, in the last 3 years, I've even pulled back completely on like the way in college, I was definitely like doing it because I was around it all the time. Then I got out of college. I definitely pulled back on it. It was not, I wasn't as weekends once in a while, but then even recently I did like a 75-day stretch. No booze, nothing. Just like, I wanted to just show myself that I don't need this. Right. And I was even noticing myself like at parties and at events, and people are like, one, they would be shocked that I'm not drinking. I'm like, I'm doing a challenge for myself. I want to like prove to myself I don't need this. And then two, I was also realizing like, I don't even have alcohol in my system and I'm still the highest energy in the room. So why am I even like, why even dabble with it? You know, like I'm seeing the benefits of me not being on it. I'm seeing the amount of clearness in my headspace. So I've even, just to say, like, I have even in the last couple of years have even been so much more aware of like, I've seen it hurt my family. I've lost family members because of it. I know that I'm never going to allow myself to get to that place. But then I'm also asking myself, why do you even consume this then?
Right.
When you know it can hurt other family members, and you know that, like, I think the important thing is, why are you consuming it?
Right.
And I think more people need to ask themselves that, because are you doing it because you like the taste and you like the little extra kick? Okay, fine. But are you actually consuming to run away from something that's inside of you?
Right. Yeah. I love that you're asking yourself that question. And I think it is pretty wild how much it's used. And to be honest, the biggest thing I was going to say about me getting sober, it's not even about leaving the drugs and alcohol behind. It's about how I feel in my skin. How do I then find a sense of, like, you know how people, they'll drink or smoke to like loosen up.
Totally.
I had to learn how to loosen up just with myself.
Totally.
So that's been the biggest blessing, is like going to a party. I remember I used to be like, okay, I need to have a few drinks and then I'll be having fun.
Yeah.
And now I just walk into a party and there's no barrier to get through.
Yeah.
It's just me.
Yeah.
But it really is one of those things where it's all about, for me, my state of being. And if I go to a party and I feel uncomfortable, which I'm very lucky to be extroverted. There are plenty of people who don't feel like they can socialize easily or all those things. So I totally understand wanting to use a substance to help you feel better. It's like a social lubricant.
Yeah.
But it is the biggest like blessing to learn how to live sober in your skin and not use something else.
Do you know how many people are going to listen to this and like start asking themselves of like, how does one live a sober life?
Right.
And that was even just to do 75 days strong. After like the first 2 or 3 weeks, before that, I had done Sober October last year, inspired by the GOAT Joe Rogan. And then when I was flying back in July, when I was telling you about before we started the podcast, and I was making these realizations about getting back into podcasting, I was also like, I want to challenge myself and just cut off the booze for a bit and see how that changes my mind. But the amount of people that are going to hear this, and I would have people chiming in even on my Instagrams when I was doing like updates, like 50 days or like every 10 days.
That's
I was
a lot
posting.
Of days.
It I mean, not as strong as 6 years, which we'll get into. But it was like so mind boggling when I'd have people chime in and they'd be like, I can't even do like 3 days. Like, and then I'm like, that is such a cultural issue that nobody wants to talk about. Drugs is another conversation, but alcohol alone, that is such an like, oh, it just blows my mind, because there are people that feel they need that in order to survive, in order to live, which is extremely scary to me if you think about it.
Yeah. It makes sense that, I mean, we all learn things generationally and from our families, and how much it's embedded in our culture. I do remember thinking, how am I ever going to live without these things? And I'm so glad to know that there is a reality where I can live in, where I don't feel like I'm missing out at all.
Yeah.
I really don't. It's not like I go to a party and I'm like, oh, I'm really missing out. It's just not my reality. My reality is that that's not good for me. It doesn't make me who I want to be.
Yeah.
And like you said, I don't need it.
Yeah.
In order to have a good time. But that's something that needs to be learned and tested out for oneself.
Yeah. I had read a caption of yours, and it said, a big part of my awakening came when I began seeing the life around me for the first time. That is so powerful. Let me say that one more time. A big part of my awakening, the second half is where it's juicy. When I began seeing the life around me for the first time. I can't think of the moment of like when I started to be more awake in the sense, but there's going to be somebody that hears this and has no idea, like when you're saying awakening, what does that mean? Or even what does that sentence mean? How do you describe what that means?
Yeah.
To be awoke, to be awakened, and to like not just see a tree, but like
to really see it.
Yeah.
I know it probably does sound a little crazy to some.
It sounds crazy to people that don't think that way.
Yes. And I used to be the most asleep person of all time. Seriously. Like, I remember being like, what someone would say something. I remember somebody asked me, as long as you're connected to your morals and values. I was like, what are those? I was so disconnected from even pondering who I was or what my purpose was or my morals and values. So I've been in a reality where none of that made sense to me. It wasn't part of my paradigm. And then what happened was, as I got into enough pain, I got into so much emotional pain to where I didn't want to live anymore. Like, I couldn't bear being me. And I think that I've heard this quote that when you live in a nightmare, you're closer to enlightenment than if you live in a regular dream. Because if you live in a nightmare, things are scary, crazy, wild. Like, you're more likely to maybe like wake up from that and be like, what's happening? If you live in a normal dream and everything's chilling, everything's cool, you can kind of just float through life. Your whole life, you're just kind of dreaming.
Yeah.
And I was living in an absolute nightmare, and somehow it allowed me to like wake up. And what happened is I've heard it described as ego death. That's literally what happened to me, is that my living in my ego became so painful that I literally died. My identity died because either that was going to happen spiritually, emotionally, I was going to like die, or I was going to physically die because I was harming myself. It was like really, really bad. So I had this crazy experience. And the moment I really started to see the life around me and have that feeling for the first time is I remember my first little spiritual awakening was when I admitted this big truth about myself, which is that validation from other people was my number one addiction. And I spoke that out loud, and it was like this part of me deep down spoke up against that ego part of me that just wanted to keep living in that. You know what I'm saying? Like, my ego wouldn't have wanted me to admit that, because then I wouldn't be able to keep playing its games. But I spoke up and said, attention, validation from others is my number one addiction. And then all of a sudden I literally felt this weight lift off of me, and I felt different in my skin. I felt like my child self again. And what happened in that moment is I felt connected to something deeper inside of me, like, you know, not this identity in my mind that my ego had created. That part of me that has been the same since I was a little girl. The part of me that was the same when I was born. And as I grow, that awareness inside of me that has existed the whole time. And I felt this feeling of self-love for the first time. And all of a sudden I looked around at trees and at grass, and I was just like, wait a second, has this been here the whole time? Seriously, like, a freaking bug is just like this little life that's like squirming around and flying. And I'm like looking at like these beautiful flowers that emerge from the earth. I was looking up at the sky, and I was like, are you, wait, like, is this serious? I could not believe it, that literally the sky just keeps going. Okay. It just keeps going. And I remember I drew this photo of myself because I could feel this for the first time. I drew a photo of how I was feeling. It was my spiritual awakening that I was feeling. And there's a yellow light that I draw like beaming from my chest. Okay, that's whatever. But then I drew the layers of the earth beneath me. And I drew like the layers of the sky. Like I could just perceive and sense that I'm standing on the ground right now. Okay. But below that is like dirt. Below that is whatever. And you get to the core of the earth and it's like freaking lava. I don't even know. Okay. But all I'm saying is that for me, exercising that part of my mind where I recognize the magic of what's happening, like the fact that all of my body parts are just working together and like the cells in my body are communicating to one another and all of that crazy stuff, just examining the nature of being alive and the nature of existence. It started to exercise this part of my mind that I hadn't exercised before. And what that did was it changed my own sense of identity. I no longer felt like I was this separate self over here with this sense of identity and I'm Niki and I'm from Boston and all this stuff and I'm good at this and I'm bad at that. Like, ugh, like that just makes me cringe because that's not really me. What I associate as me is, like I said, just that awareness that somehow has the gift of being here to experience life on earth through this vehicle. I have these senses that I get to. So it's crazy. I could go on and on forever. And it's to be experienced. Like no one can do that for you. And that's, we could get into meditation later, but really what meditation is about for me is just being able to like really settle down into like the subtleness of your being.
Yeah. Wow. I knew you were going to be a great guest. Yeah, I think that how my thought is that how do we get more people to be awoke, which is the hardest thing, because I really think that people have to go through their own journey, hurdles, shitty moments.
Oh, yeah.
Like you have to kind of go through it in order to be at a place where you need it, kind of it happens, Yeah. So I don't know. I think that like I feel very fortunate that I woke up to like what this reality is. There wasn't like a moment, but I think it has been a progressive thing since I graduated college. So probably when I was around 22. So like I feel very fortunate that I started picking things up at that time and then till now. But I think that there's going to be, and there is a lot of people that just live their life and they're not even fully aware of what they're even doing.
They're in that dream I was talking about.
Yeah.
It's just the dream. It's the dream of living in this sense of identity inside of our minds. And if that identity is working for you, you might stay in it.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part. But I do think more and more people are becoming sick, because sick for me means they have maybe anxiety, depression. They're not living their, whatever life they want to live. And so I do think more and more people are getting to that place where they can't really afford to not look at that deeper part of themselves. So how do we get more people? I mean, the other thing I was going to say is this is a conversation I have a lot of times with people about. It's this crazy idea of, do we really choose? I feel like you hit it spot on to say like you feel lucky that happened to you, because I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why some of us reach that point where we're willing to see things in a new way. But I do think that the way to do it is really to carry it in yourself. Like for me, that's all I can really focus on is not expecting anyone to be anywhere else in their journey, and meeting them with love, and hopefully that love, and showing that like, oh, I walk around with love for myself, and that gives other people permission to do the same. So that kind of thing. But it is very difficult, and it's like crazy that our world, like the values and the media and everything that's happening. Yeah, we were talking about how media can be amazing for sure, and I'm so glad so many people are using it to share positive messages. But the general narrative portrayed by society is a lot of surface level stuff sometimes.
Totally.
And I know for me, like when I'm focused on the surface level aspects of life and that's it, and I'm not kind of grounded and rooted in something bigger and deeper, I start to die on the inside. Yeah.
I really think that like I feel so fortunate for the environment I was raised in. Where it's like there was always a roof over, and I feel very grateful and lucky. There was always a roof over our head. I have a sister 2 years younger than me. There was always food on the table. Parents were loving. They pushed us to try things that we wanted to try. They were open-minded. So I could keep going and going, but I am such a product of that environment. Exactly. And so when I see other people out there in the world doing bad things or pushing bad messages through media or just not being a light or a positive person, I really have empathy for them because I go, that could easily be me.
Exactly.
I could have easily, I don't know where they were raised. I don't know the lessons they were taught, but they are solely a product of their environment. So I think a lot of it too, just it all comes back to like where people come from, their stories, what they were exposed to.
Right.
And so, yeah, I just feel very fortunate because even when I was graduating college and I told my parents I'm not getting a job, which is like, what? You'd think, now most parents, I had buddies of mine that I went to college with that like, they're like, my parents have been forcing me to get a job. They've been on me about getting a job. My parents did not care. They literally said, you do what makes you happy. Your college loans kick in 6 months. We are not helping you with that. Figure it out. And so once again, it's like that mindset of find your passion was them cheering me on. So I think a lot of times it's just, we're such products of our environments. And even if you are somebody that isn't raised, and maybe there's a lot underneath that layer for somebody's childhood or what they were exposed to, you can at least control the people that you surround yourself with now moving forward. You can control what you consume on social media. Like I would label that the social media diet. Not really talked about enough, but like, is your feed full of things that are uplifting and make you feel good? Or is it just nothing that is bringing any positive like light to your life? So, yeah, I don't know.
No, you hit on a very important thing, which I think the word compassion that was one of my biggest lessons. And I'm super grateful that my own struggles taught me how to be compassionate with other people. Cause I know that looking back at the girl that I was and how much I was struggling, I know that I was doing the best with the pain that I had at the time. And so now I can move forward. And like you said, I can look at other people in their experience and see, okay, this is where they are on their journey. And I get to walk around with compassion rather than this idea that they could be doing different than how they are.
Yeah.
And that's just, for me, that's a beautiful way to live.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a beautiful way to live. Back in May, so you, I mean, this thing could go so many ways. You had that moment on Sunset. It ends up pretty much just redirecting your entire life. You go 6 years strong of nothing.
Yes.
Like no booze, no weed, no nothing, which is like, the fact that you even were like proud when I said 75 days or like even 50, like I'm sitting here like that is nothing compared to what you have done, but it's a start. And so what I thought was interesting was that a couple months ago, I think it was in May, you kind of had you were like giving yourself leash.
Yeah.
Like I could experience a little of this stuff. I know who I am. Like I know that I'm not going to allow myself like I think it started with like a pen of,
it was like
CBD, and then I was like, let me take an edible, and then it was just like this path, right?
Yeah.
So like, what was that going through that like? You know, you 6 years strong, then you're kind of like experiencing some new things, and then you're also realizing, wait, what am I doing here? Was that hard for you? Are you somebody that like was beating yourself up after the fact, and how did that moment kind of happen?
Yeah, good question. So I did go 6 years strong without anything. And I think there's a lot to say, but at the beginning of my sobriety, I was very heavily involved in AA and doing that whole thing. And I was constantly around other sober people and all of these things. And it was never something I really leaned on, because for me, I always was lucky enough to recognize that my connection with myself and with the world and like me feeding myself spiritually was what's going to keep me happy, sober. And I would always say I need to create a state of being that I don't need relief from. So as long as I did that, as long as I'm feeling good in my skin, I don't need relief. And for a long time, I didn't know that was possible. And so for anybody who's listening that feels like they always need something, they need something to make them feel better. I used to live that way for a long time. And I got to that point where I didn't need anything. I felt fine, content. In AA, they call it restless, irritable, and discontent, when you have that feeling of like just needing something to get out of your skin. So what happened was, it's very interesting, is that after about 4 years of sobriety, I stopped doing the things that I did in the beginning that made me feel really good, because my life got better, and I got a job. I was working at a really cool startup company, and I started singing for an agency, and my life got really big. And there's so much to say, because it all led up to this moment where I questioned my sobriety and everything like that. But I want to say that the biggest thing that in being sober, and something I learned, was that self-centeredness was the biggest issue. Like, when you can learn how to live in a non-self-centered way, meaning live not for what can I get out of life, but what can I give to others. That's like, if I could just hit that one, like that's that one spot where when I make my life about giving to others, nothing else matters. I'm great. I'm fine. Like, I'm happy that way. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is because slowly my life became a little bit more and more about me. What am I going to get? What career am I going to have? What's going to happen to me? And then my sense of identity, like I said, like I had that ego death. And then slowly over time, my ego rebuilt itself and was like, oh, I'm spiritual Niki now. And I know I've had these crazy spiritual experiences, and doesn't that set me apart from other people? Like, that's how the ego works, is it wants to have this sense of identity about who we are. And so that happened. And slowly I started to feel less and less free, less and less content in my skin. My self-consciousness started to come back. My self-judgment started to come back. So all of a sudden now, after 4 or 5 years of sobriety, I'm really not feeling great. And my biggest passion and purpose was to help other people connect with themselves and shed the layers and really get in touch with the deepest part of themselves. But when I'm not doing that myself, when I'm not in a good space, then I feel like a fraud.
Yeah. You can't be of service to other people.
You can't. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't shine light on other people when I was blocking myself from my own light. So I got into a really dark place, to be honest. And luckily, it's so amazing that I've never gotten back to that point where I really didn't care, like way back in the day where I would really just go for it and treat myself terribly. So now it's more subtle, and I don't, luckily just shoot back to those things that gave me relief. But it was like that subtle progression that you mentioned of I'm around friends and maybe they're smoking, and because I'm not super content and happy with who I am, and I'm comparing myself to the people around me, because at this point I'm just hanging out with some really awesome people, and I'm around people who are doing amazing things and super influential, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, who am I? And I'm not even connected to my own light, and I don't feel like an amazing person. I don't feel beautiful because I'm not shining from the inside out. And so it makes sense that when I'm not feeling great, I'm going to want to take something that makes me feel better and makes me relax and loosen up and gives me some pleasure. Because if my internal dialogue is just really mean, it makes sense, like I said, that I want to take something. So I start finding myself in that place, that restless, irritable place where I'm like not content. And it started with smoking CBD. What is my intention for doing that? It's because I want to feel a sense of relief. And so I slowly saw it creep back in. And then I was like, you know what? I got sober when I was 17, and I started to see that like marijuana is like this beautiful plant that grows from the earth. It's so beautiful, and it brings a lot of people great things. Yeah. And I thought maybe it would be fine. But sure enough, I ate that edible and I was like, oh Lord, what did I just do? because I know that I have that side of me. Like I said, that when I take something that makes me feel better, I want more of it. And honestly, I tried that and it was fine. The next day I wasn't like dying to have more. It was like that illusion in my head that you learn in AA too. Oh, you open up the door and then it's just going to be full on. And it wasn't. It was fine. I'm sure it would have been fine for about a week or two. Mm-hmm. But then it comes down to those little moments of you're hanging out with friends and there's those little temptations that come along the way. And if I'm saying yes, it becomes harder and harder to say no, to balance it. So for me, it's all about what people say about moderation. If you can moderate, that's great. But I don't even want that door open. I can't have that door open because also I had to ask myself, does this make me a better person? And I think a lot of people struggle with their relationship with alcohol, with weed, with anything, because if you can do it in a moderate way and it doesn't have any negative impacts, an addiction is something that has a negative impact, but you just keep doing it anyway. Yeah. So anyways, I realized, and I asked myself, honestly, I don't think that it makes me a better person to smoke weed. It makes me lazy, makes me tired, makes me like eat Cocoa Puffs. Like I don't eat Cocoa Puffs, you know?
Totally. So
then I haven't done it since that real conversation with myself, which was like probably a week later. And I'm really happy. And to be honest, I'm still on that journey right now where I've been connecting with myself more and more. But when I do have those days, I'll have those days where I'm still working out, like I said, that narrative that came back into my head of comparing myself. To be totally honest, right now in my life, I feel like I have some decoding to do. I'm working through another round of breaking down my beliefs of like refiring new neurological pathways, like because I've habitually started judging myself again and all of that stuff. So it's very human. I think we all can do it at times, but it really is the habit and it's breaking habits. So I'm really working on it right now. Like just being mindful of being like the thought police. If a thought goes by that isn't empowering and loving, I just notice it and I don't judge myself for it because that makes it worse. I just say, okay, that's a thought that I'm not going to choose to listen to. Yeah.
So a couple things. I have so much to say. So I don't think, and I agree, the moderation, huge. That's how I've even rationalized it with my own life. I'm like, if I can moderate, like I'm fine. But I would be willing to bet that 99% of people that are touching it, alcohol, just to keep it easy, or marijuana, is to feel a different way. When I drink, even did last night, I'm arguably in the greatest position of my life right now, mentally, physically, career. I mean, everything. I just feel like I'm hitting my stride, right? So I'm not trying to escape anything, but part of me is like, it's the social thing. It's an experience.
It's pleasurable. It's fun.
Yeah, it's pleasurable. Yeah, so it's just interesting though, because at the end of the day, when I break it down, why are you doing it? It's to feel a different way. Even though I already feel good, feel fucking fantastic. Exactly. But I'm still itching to feel something different. So I think that's a great point. I'm curious, what are some of those, and this kind of is a perfect segue into like the meditation, Thought Police, being very mindful of like what you're thinking about. What have you been experiencing recently? And then also, how did you get into meditation and how has that impacted you?
Yeah. First of all, there's something I wanted to touch on about, I just wanted to say that I think it's crazy because unless you have a really strong reason not to drink or smoke or something, like it's probably hard not to do it because of like socially things like that. So I just want to say it's something that whenever I tell people I don't drink or smoke, they automatically reflect on themselves because that's what we all do. We reflect and they're like, wow, like how could you do that?
They always say that. How?
Right.
How do you do that?
Exactly. But I also want to say that if I didn't have this experience where like when I do it, it's really bad, like it's easier for me because it's really bad. I can't do it. So I almost feel like it's harder for people who that's not their story. Like they can do it. They could, you can, if you want to. That's harder to really have that, like conviction or commitment to not do it would be hard. So it's all about like really the reason, but to go into how I've been feeling, and it kind of makes sense. Like it's a good segue because it's like this crazy blessing. Because it's really bad, I'm forced into a sober lifestyle. And what does that mean? That means that I'm living in my sense of reality and I don't have something I can take to just escape from it. And so I'm constantly needing to just deal with my inner world constantly. And I've been experiencing a lot recently, a lot of, like I said, I'm in a growth period again where, I mean, we always are, but I'm really in one of those humbling spaces where I am really open to learning and growing, looking at myself honestly. Because as soon as you hear this from people a lot, like as soon as I think I know something, that's when it's not good. Like as soon as I get solid and in my mind on this is who I am, or this is how life is, or something. It's just life has a way of just knocking you back onto your butt again. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So recently, I've had some crazy revelations, and I'm realizing that there's so many simple things that I'll forget. And like, for example, the thing about self-centeredness, the thing about how when I'm unhappy, it's usually because I'm focused on me and what I'm going to get from life. And I'm not focused on my true like purpose and essence, which is to just be a vehicle for life to move through, just to be here to touch other people. Because like, am I really alive on this earth to just take? Am I really alive to just get what I want, me? And it's like, I just see the connection between everything. And when I recognize that, I'm so much happier. But it's something I forgot. Like I said, for the past few years, it became all about me again. So I'm working on that right now to remember that my purpose is how can I touch the lives of others? And then another thing is that, like I said, with the whole AA thing and needing to have a spiritual awakening, is that what I've realized is that I genuinely have a condition. And maybe we all have it to a certain degree, the human condition. But for me, a condition where when I'm disconnected from what I call my spirit, soul, whatever, for me, it's synonymous with the word God. That's just me. Because what that word means to me, like it's just this idea that something is divine. It's this idea that there's something magical happening here. I mean, we are literally on a planet in space right now. And the rational side of my mind, or that we're all taught to just see all this as normal and just get a job and chase money, and it doesn't work. There's something missing. So what I mean is there's a part of me I can be disconnected from. And so that's something I'm working on right now, is remembering who am I in all of this, and connecting to, like I said, when I close my eyes, who am I? And I had a therapist say to me back in the day, like, if I were to chop off like one of your legs, would you be less of a person? No. So I don't want to get too far into it, but it's like, I'm not just my physical body, right? Because my physical body grows and changes over time. I was once tiny and I grew bigger and bigger and bigger. Your body's cells are constantly regenerating. So you're physically different than you were before, physically. Totally. So am I going to attach who I am to just my physical appearance? Like, no, there's a part of me that is alive and awake and perceives. And that part of me is the experiencer of life. And when I attribute who I am as my identity to things that have been out of my control, which is the circumstances I was brought up in, or whether or not even like your ability to be intelligent, right? Like, we don't choose what brain we have or what food was in our environment. What I mean is that none of that for me is really who I am per se. I don't need to have tallies on, am I good enough? It's more just identifying, like I said, with with that deeper part of who I am, and which rolls into the meditation thing. And meditating for me, I think it can be kind of misconstrued too. I think the word meditation has
totally.
It's the same as
this
the word
woo-woo,
God.
it's like some woo-woo
yeah,
stuff.
there's so much connotation around it. But like I said, it's very simple for me. It's almost so simple that it's hard. It's so simple that it's hard, that when I sit down and I take time to just literally observe, what is it like to be this idea of Niki? Or what is it like to be a human being alive? What does my aliveness feel like? Can I feel the sensations in my hand or my feet or my body, or the fact that my heart is pumping and there's literally blood like rushing through my veins? So really, really paying attention, because I've been listening to a lot of podcasts and different things on this, and like literally what that does for our health, for our mental health, for our physical health. When you calibrate in that way, like Deepak Chopra talks about it, like you get into that homeostasis thing where your body's kind of in harmony, because when you're thinking negative thoughts, or when you're constantly thinking and your cells are listening, and you're putting your body into a lot of stress. If you're worried about the future or something, your body is physically, like, your cells are stressed. They're going to age faster. It's not healthy. And so when you take the time to sit down with yourself and just not think about everything that your mind is trained to think about. So it takes time for you to kind of train that horse and just watch the horse run around like a crazy person and don't judge it and just be there. And the more you do that, the more you just kind of start noticing. And I've heard it as like a mental bicep curl.
Yes.
You just kind of bring it back to the moment. And I sit there and I'm like, what is my aliveness like? And all of a sudden you might get a little glimpse of this feeling of just being. And it is so blissful that I oftentimes want to latch onto it and be like, I will only feel this for the rest of my life. And then my mind's like, blah, 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 blah. And I'm back to the craziness. So it's a constant practice. And I really think it has to come down, for me, it has to come down to, what are my intentions?
Yeah.
And my intentions, I'm going to meditate because I love myself enough to meditate. And sometimes that sentence made me want to vomit.
I know. When I first started hearing about meditation, I was like, what is this? Like,
yeah.
And it was weirdly, it was around 22 when I was graduating college. I started diving into like self-development and listening to podcasts. And I kept hearing a commonality in all these successful people that I was listening to and trying to like learn from. I meditate daily. I was just, why is this a common? And what is meditation? Downloaded the app Headspace, started using it, and I think it's like when if you're trying to get even physical fitness, you're not going to see results after day 1, day 20, day 30. You're going to start to feel a difference, but you don't really see true difference in the meditation until you stay consistent long enough. So it's like I've been consistently meditating pretty much daily for the last 4 years, and I still feel like I'm on chapter 1, page 1. I still I haven't even gotten through the intro. Like there's just so much more layers to it that I need to learn. And even like I'm so interested in, I want to do like a silent meditation retreat and go for like 2 days and just like experience that. And even like recently, like I was doing 10 minutes a day. Now I do 20 minutes a day. This past week I used to do 10 minutes a day, and then I moved it to 20 minutes a day, twice a day. First thing in the morning, and then before I go to sleep. And I was like, wow, I feel like I'm like on a different mode now, because I'm just so much more aware of my thoughts. And I think the meditation helps you set good intention for the day. I almost kind of imagine, for people that have no idea or don't really understand what meditation is, it's almost like, this is a weird analogy of, I don't know how I thought of this, but I kind of like visualize, you could if yourself was a spirit, if you were like air or like some wind, like just imagine yourself, but you're not like an actual person, right? You're sitting in a sofa chair in your mind, and you're just watching all of these thoughts that just roll around your mind, the positives, the shitty things. you start thinking about the past, what you want to do next in your career, blah, 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 blah. That's the meditation is about sitting in that sofa and just analyzing it and not analyzing it,
or
just
not analyzing it, pass.
and just allowing the thought to be a thought, and it's not a positive or a negative. It's a neutral thing that is going through your mind.
Yeah.
I really like the horses running wild, because that's exactly what it is. It can be craziness.
Yeah.
But I think it's so powerful.
Yeah.
Just the practice alone.
It reminds me of an analogy I would sometimes tell the people I would work with is I almost feel like these old beliefs too that gnaw at your head, or certain things that come to your mind a lot. It's like this little kid poking at you constantly. And it's almost like the more you give the kid attention, like you're getting a rise out of him, and he'll just keep doing it because he's, getting a rise out of you. But if you just stop giving it your energy. So if my mind says, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, and I just kind of stop feeding into it, the kid will get bored, stop tapping at you.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden that thought doesn't come to my mind anymore.
Yeah.
And that's literally what happened for me with retraining my mind.
Yeah.
Is that I used to have these old beliefs over and over and over, and I'd write down in my journal every single day that this is what my head is saying, this is what it wants me to think. But then I'd turn it around and say, so basically what I'm saying is it's the same thing where it takes time, like you said about the meditation. It takes time to reprogram, but you absolutely can do it. You just have to do that tedious work.
Yeah.
And another thing I was going to say about the meditation thing is that I was never really someone who wanted to sit down and cross my legs and do a proper meditation all the time. For me, it was, for a long time, it was just living mindfully. And I still believe in that heavily, that I don't necessarily need to sit down and walk away from my life to get quiet. I can walk around and be aware and mindful of everything in front of me, sitting here. Am I thinking about what I'm going to say, or am I listening to what you're saying? And when I'm doing the dishes, am I thinking about a million things, or am I just doing the dishes? All of these examples. And so I really am passionate about living in that mindful space as much as possible, because why would I want to spend, of course, maybe you sit down for 20 minutes and it could have these lasting effects of making your life less hectic in your mind. But I would just encourage people that they can practice it. And some people hate sitting down and doing that traditional type meditation.
Yeah.
But I will say that for the past, I don't know how long, maybe 6 months, I have been doing a morning meditation. It's probably because I was kind of struggling a lot with my mind. And I was like, you know what, I'm just going to sit down and have a morning routine. And so I sit down in the morning and I do 20 minutes, and it is beautiful. But like I said, I stand by it. I'm still someone who's so, I encourage this mindfulness in all moments, and not just for 20 minutes a day.
Yeah. I love the morning meditation because I really do believe it sets the good intention for the day. So it allows you to, I don't check my phone for the first 3 hours of the day. First thing I do is a workout. I get the blood flowing, listen to music, get the juices going. And then I'll meditate after I shower. I'll meditate, set good intention for the day, and then it's like switching gears from the workout to now it's like, all right, now it's like get into work mode. But I think that, and I have, because of doing the consistent meditation, it allowed me to then be more mindful of everything that I do. And even even today I was driving to Santa Monica for this workout class, and I even catch myself slipping where I'm driving, but my mind is somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it's like trying to pull that back in, or like you were saying, like washing the dishes. 99% of people that hear this, when you're washing dishes, you're not there.
No.
But you're like, it's actually kind of crazy when you think about it, because you'll go through 20 minutes of doing the dishes or folding your laundry, and you sit down and you're like, did I just do that? I don't even remember it.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so I think it is so powerful when you can train your mind to be more mindful and present, and just experiencing and not allowing your mind chatter to go elsewhere.
Exactly. But I do like what you said about the morning practice. I do think it's a beautiful thing to do, because it also, you're sending a message to yourself when you're when you sit down.
Totally.
And you're setting the tone. So it's a beautiful thing to do. So I definitely don't want to knock that, but I agree with, it's like living mindfully is it's a whole practice.
Yeah.
And it's like some people might live their whole life in this realm of the mind and just constantly painting pictures about on top of their experience. And then, you don't want to get to the end of your life and realize that you weren't really there.
Yeah. That's like the scariest thing of all time. Literally fucking scared the shit out of me. And I think meditation teaches, I think because of the practice of meditation, it teaches us certain skills that allow us to ramp up our mental health, which is a very, that's a whole nother like layer. I think the meditation being more mindful, then you're able to control your thoughts, which then you're almost, I would say you're like your biggest hype man or hype woman, because you're like, I can become the person I've always wanted to be. I'm passionate. I'm loving. I'm blank, 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 blank. But I saw, I didn't quote it, but there was something you had talked about, and definitely in something like of your Instagram, but like when in the space of mental health, how has letting go bettered your mental health? Because sometimes we get so caught up on thinking about something that happened in the past, and we keep just like replaying the moment in our mind, and it just gets to us, and then we get frustrated, and then it ruins our day, and it ruins the interactions, and it like it holds us up. But I think there's a lot to be said about this idea of letting go and being indifferent about the way things kind of play out in your life. So how do you think incorporating that mindset of just letting go has bettered your mental health?
Yeah, that's huge. And it's funny that you bring it up, because I just had a session this morning with someone, and I had a deep realization about how I had been a bit holding on recently. But I have seen that when I'm in a good place within myself, meaning I feel happy and free and joyous, it's when I'm trusting the flow of what's happening, when I'm trusting the universe, and for lack of better words, I really think that it's just this crazy thing, because our mind really wants to latch on. It wants to figure things out. And it's very uncomfortable sometimes to let go. And I remember, honestly, the first time I ever realized that I could let go, I was 17 and I was in this treatment center. And it occurred to me for the first time ever that I didn't have control over anything other than my reaction. Like, I don't have control over you. I don't have control over what happens in the world. And I was living in that delusion of control for a long time. And it's weird how much it occurred to me, I don't have control over anything, and how that was instantly a bit scary, but so freeing, because I was like, you mean to tell me that I can live my life with this idea that I don't have control? I can surrender to what is. And honestly, I lived in that blissfully for a while, where it was like I could see that anything that happened, I would just allow it to be, like that idea that things happen for a reason. And it's funny, because I get into places where maybe I'm trying to hold on more and I want to make things happen, and then you forget to zoom out and say, okay, there's something happening here that is beyond my control, meaning you never know who you're going to meet. You never know what's going to happen around the corner. And to really be able to trust the flow of what's happening. And it's ironic, because people talk about this idea of manifesting. And the more I try to hold on, it's like, what kind of energy am I putting out into the world? And everybody around me can like kind of see that I'm trying to force things, and they're not picking up on, you know what I mean? So when you trust, you're emanating a certain type of vibration and frequency, and then beautiful things happen.
Yeah.
So it really does feed into itself. But I will be the first to say that I can forget that too sometimes, and I can want to control and be worried about what's going to happen. And for example, I started singing with this agency, and I started to sing at, restaurants and bars and stuff like this all around Los Angeles. And that came out of nowhere. And I all of a sudden got this job that really paid my bills and allowed me to use my voice to make money, and I got to see what my voice could do. And could I have guessed that would have happened? Absolutely not. Yeah. Before that, I was singing like maybe once a month. My confidence was super down because I didn't know what I could do. And then I got that opportunity to sing, and to be, like I said, to be able to make money and afford my life off of singing was never something I thought could happen. And it happened. So it's crazy that 1 minute, you're worried about something, and the next minute you're like, oh, where did that come from? Or you don't know who you're going to meet. So it's actively choosing to trust.
Yeah, this is beautiful. I think the manifesting thing, because I talked to somebody about this on a recent podcast, I don't remember who it was, but I think it's important to manifest / visualize like who you want to become or the things you want to do in your life, and have like a sense of direction, but not be like so tense about not having the blueprint of how you're going to get there. So it's important to have an idea of what your passions are, what you really love to do, and visualizing that, and kind of trying to give your life some sense of direction of what you think is where you should be working towards, but also surrender. Love that. There's a great book. I don't know if you ever read it, called The Surrender Experiment.
I just finished it. So beautiful.
Beautiful.
Michael Singer.
Oh,
so good.
Beautiful. Read it, ladies and gentlemen. And that book was incredible. That really opened my...
Have you read Untethered Soul, his first book?
I did it backwards. I read The Surrender Experiment, and then I read The Untethered Soul.
Amazing.
But I agree. I think it's like, don't get so like tight about having everything figured out. Just like you said, the music, you didn't know you were going to be singing around LA, making money. I never knew that starting a podcast would get me into the door to interview the founder of Liquid IV, which would then get me a job at Liquid IV. I never knew that. Steve Jobs, legend himself, bless his soul. He said one quote, and I'm not a quotable person, so it means a lot that I even know this. He said that you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking back. And so it's like, there's no point in stressing of like not having the perfect game plan and just going with the flow of life and doing your best, but surrendering to where that flow takes you, and just kind of seeing where you end up.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people sometimes think that to go with the flow means that you're not actively working towards things. And that's just not accurate. But you do have to find that balance. And I am guilty of being a very flowy person. Like I'm not a super, super structured, organized human being. I'm very much like wanting to just roll with it, go with the flow. And I'm working at adding more structure to my life. And I was talking to someone in a session this morning about how even magic needs structure. That's what she said. Like even everything that you want to achieve, and even if you want to come from this like beautiful flowy space, like in order to create things, you have to put structure to things. You have to make them happen. And so it's kind of like putting in the action, but not being hung up on the result. Totally. And that's a beautiful thing if you can do that.
Totally. And also that's going to make you realize, do you actually love doing something? Because you're not actually enjoying the daily process of doing that thing. It's probably not the right thing for you. So like, whether it was the music and, that was a growth progress for you to even get to the point where you go, now you're getting paid to do it. If I look at it myself, I would have given up on podcasting long time ago if I was so focused on the results and being the biggest podcaster in the world and having all these numbers of downloads. Like if that was the sole intention from the jump, I never would have continued to do it, because it just doesn't happen like that. But I do it because I love connecting with people. I love sharing these types of conversations. Like I always tell people, like the conversations that I have on these podcasts, because I think sometimes people think like podcast, like these podcasts, like it's like so interviewee, and like you're like, it's like you're flicking on a different switch and you're putting on a show. But it's like, these are the conversations that I have with people at a coffee shop. Like I would want to have the same conversation with you somewhere else. So it's like the why is really important. And Yeah, I don't know, just
Yeah,
trusting the flow of life.
Yeah. No, you're hitting the nail on the head, and that's something I'm thinking about a lot recently.
Oh, the structure, that was what you're saying too. Sorry, I
Yeah.
missed that.
Yeah, like I have a friend and she's an artist, and her and I have been connecting a lot about this, and thought about starting our own podcast just on
Do it.
On about being a creative or creating, and just being so real and honest about the things that you face and the blocks that come up, and because it's so human, and but the point is that it all comes down to why you're doing something, and anything can, like, you can take someone who's a musician or anyone, you take something that they love to do, and unless I remember and enjoy what I'm doing in the moment, like unless I'm really enjoying the act, like you said, of doing it, not just the result, it's not going to work. And I'm actively working on that right now with my singing. Is like, for a long time I was caught up in the whole comparison game, and feeling like me singing, I'd need to achieve a certain result, and it kind of just kept me away from it. It made me not want to do it, because I don't really want to do anything that doesn't make me feel lit up with life and happy and joyous. And I'm only just now getting to that point where I'm connecting to the true reason of why I sing.
I'm going to dive into that in a second. I'm curious though, what was, you had said it twice, the session you did this morning. What was that session?
Okay. So, do you know Blue? Mm-mm. Okay. So I did a session with Blue, and she's amazing. She has a podcast.
Blue's a person.
Yeah. She has a podcast called Deja Blue.
Oh, that's great branding.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful podcast, and she's an amazing human being. And we did this gene key reading. And the gene key, and I don't want to speak too much on it because I'm just learning about it, but it's something with astrology and then some other ancient, like, Asian philosophy that they kind of combine together with your birth chart, and they read and they tell you about your shadow and about your gift to the world. And I had an absolutely insanely amazing session with her this morning that really, really helped me connect with myself, because I think part of it is I'm in a space where I'm very, very open, and I'm wanting to learn and grow. And she was saying things that were just like so on point, and it was all about the different archetypes that we play in our lives. And she said something about like what I got so much from it, but some big points are that what makes me happy is making other people feel good. And that, like, being like a server, like living to serve other people. And it just hit that nail on the head of that big thing, like I said, that in the beginning of my sobriety that I connected to, that made me so happy, is remembering that my life is about giving. Yeah. And when I'm doing that, I'm like, it's amazing. It feels bliss. It feels blissful.
Yeah. I think even what you're doing now of this, like, conversation, that this is giving, because you're able to share your experiences and giving it to the world for people to consume, relate to, learn from. So even it might not feel like it, because it's not like you're out there directly helping somebody, or you can see like that actual value that you're bringing. But I guarantee you there will be somebody that is going to DM you from this conversation, and it's going to tell you something that has been on their mind, or how
what they're going through.
Yeah. So even you just sharing your voice, and that's why I would say even do the podcast. Don't even think about it. Do it, because there's so much just value in sharing. Yeah. And it can be twofold. One, it feels good to do, but then two, it is like a service to others, because they're able to listen in and learn, and it's just beautiful.
That was a lot of what we were talking about she was basically saying that there's like this loop where you might get this kind of like divine inspiration or something to create, and then the second half of the loop is actually sharing it. And she said a lot of people get stuck at that first part because they're too afraid to share. And then it's a loop, it feeds into itself. So then you share, and then you get more inspiration, and that's, I agree so much. Like, it's crazy that I came to do this with you right after that session, because it really does feel like it is where I want to be, because it's like me allowing me to share with people is like everything to me.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on, I know women specifically love asking this question, but they'll say, "When's your birthday?" Okay. And I go, "Why do you want to know?
Sign?
What's your sign?" So, what are your thoughts on just that alone? Like,
I'm
not familiar.
I'm not a astrology like person. Really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm happy. I'm a very open person. Like I will learn from any religion. I'll read any text. I'm open to just reading things and learning things. And I think that astrology is a way for some people to find a lot of meaning and they can reflect. And sometimes if I'm feeling down, I'll read my astrology and see, you know what I'm saying? It's just, I think it can be a tool. But I have no real opinion on whether or not it's like, whatever.
I guess you could always look at it as like a religion. Like people
that's what I'm realizing.
They use, that's a medium that is something that they gravitate.
It's a method.
It's
a method of understanding, and I do think it can be a really beautiful tool for people. Like it allows them to reflect on their emotions, and also I think it has a way of giving yourself compassion. It's almost like if you read something about yourself that came from something else or like the universe, it allows you to have some compassion for yourself. Like, oh, this isn't just me creating whatever. It's like, oh, this is my life. This is something that maybe I was born into. Does that make sense? So it gives a little bit of a perspective, an outer perspective.
I never even thought of the idea that that's what religion is it's giving people almost like a playbook or guidelines to live by. And
something to pray to.
Really interesting. I never even really thought of it like that.
No, I agree, and I think that we could go on and on forever about that topic because it's very interesting. But I think as human beings, like we want to have something to believe in. And sometimes I've gone through experiences where maybe there's certain people who are very into like a certain religion. Like you might not understand it, right? You might just be like, "What?" But the thing, if that person is getting a sense of deep love and connection and purpose from that, then like I've had to learn that like that's beautiful. It might not speak to me in the same way, but that's beautiful for them. So I do think it is, like you said, it's the same thing with the astrology or really anything that we latch onto as humans. It's like we just kind of, and honestly, if I could have like a little ritual or every time I, bow down to this thing or touch this thing, like if that could give me a sense of my own divinity, like I would do it all the time. I'm just someone who personally I find it in different ways. I find it from looking up at the sky and so we're all different.
Which almost meditation in like that almost can be its own religion, because you're just I don't know, I swear that like a lot of like, at least through some of the meditation practices that I've listened to, it is its own religion. It's a mindset. It is a belief. It is a way of living your life. So
you're putting your faith in something.
Totally. The music, though, one last thing I wanted to touch on, because we kind of were bouncing around from it, and then my mind was flying all over the place. I had read that you had wrote, what I found is that it's not really so much about what it sounds like as it is about the place it's coming from. The energy or intention is what truly translates. You're getting, so now you're getting to a place where like you're getting paid to like, go around to LA and sing and perform, but what has music brought into your life that maybe meditation hasn't, maybe your sobriety hasn't, maybe going to AA hasn't? What is this thing about music that's been helping you?
It's a very interesting one. Music and I have had kind of an interesting relationship. I think that it has been one of the most difficult things for me. So I feel like it's going to be a huge place for me to grow, because like I said, with singing, with music, it's hard because it is about how other people react to it sometimes. They either like it or they don't like it. And like, so it's almost hard for me to do it without that self-conscious aspect of it. wondering if it's good enough, comparing myself to other people. So like I said, it's new for me to sing from an empowered place. And before I started singing for this agency, I only sang once in a while. When I was 16, I auditioned for The Voice and they flew me to LA. Yeah.
Whoa,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a crazy story, actually. I'll give you a quick little thing that when I was 16, I broke my collarbone, couldn't play soccer anymore. And that's when I started singing. I'd never sang really before that, only like very little.
You're a shower singer, so when you're by yourself, you'd sing.
Yeah, and no, I mean, I would sing and like little things, but I really didn't consider myself like a singer or anything like that. Then I like sang at this studio in Boston and won a competition there, and then they trained me for The Voice, and I went and I made it through on the show, and they flew me to LA, and I was with like 160 people out of like 66,000 people who auditioned or something like that. I remember hearing those numbers and just being like, how did this happen? And they also pick your song for you when you're on The Voice.
Really?
Yeah. So they gave me a song that I had never sang before, and it wasn't great for my voice. And I was super nervous. My legs were chattering in front of the producers, and I didn't make it through that last round onto the show. But anyways, after that, it's like this crazy thing where I went to school, and I would always have this thing gnawing at me and writing in my journals, I want to sing more. I want to sing more. And I just wasn't doing it. And it's because I had too much fear, and it's weird because I feel like people who are musicians, they just wake up and do it. There's nobody who needs to tell them to sing or to practice. But for me, it was always like, I'm going to keep that away.
The validation.
But I didn't even want to go there because I wasn't free enough. And so it's taken time. And then once I got that opportunity to start singing for that agency, I started singing a lot and seeing how people were responding to my voice and them being like really touched by it. And I'm still in that process right now of seeing how does it feel for me. You asked me, what does singing do for me? And when I ask myself what I get from singing, it's hard because I might sing and it might give someone else a beautiful experience. But if I'm on the inside worried about how it sounds like or something like that, I'm not really enjoying myself. So I'm still learning to enjoy myself, to be honest, when I sing. And I'm still learning to be free. And I've been trying to write more of my own songs. So it really is like kind of I feel like a newborn baby when it comes to my music and singing. But I know that, like I said, because it's so difficult for me, I feel like it's going to be a source of a lot of growth. And like if you see me in a few years and you just see me like
on tour,
doing my thing and singing and not caring about what anyone thinks about it, and it's just, I know it's going to be beautiful. I'm just on that journey right now. That's
also the most beautiful thing about it when it's early on is the openness to like where it could go, or like just the thought of like, you don't know where it could take you, but if you're enjoying it, like we were saying earlier, it's like if you're enjoying it, and of course you're going to have probably those mind conversations while you're performing, like, are people enjoying it, or yourself? You're like starting to analyze all these thoughts going on in your mind, but it's something that's so brand new to you. Right. And so I think I would bet that there's probably, some of the biggest musicians in the world that still have that mind chatter, but because of consistency but because they keep doing it over and over, they're able to control that thought more. Or you get better with the craft with time. Yeah, exactly. It allows you to be more confident and not worry about like, are people enjoying this? Are they not? Because you're in your own lane. And it kind of reminds me of what we were talking about earlier about when we do things just for the sake of doing them, like if I'm connected to my purpose around singing, then that will help. And also another thing you touched on, which is something I'm focusing on now, is honoring myself enough to hone in on my craft and to practice a lot and work really hard. Because the reason I think right now I might not feel all the way empowered is because it feels like a pretty uncut diamond. You know what I mean? Like it feels pretty raw because I know that I haven't necessarily put the work in. I've always just had like a natural, like raw voice, and I'll just show up and sing, and that's it. And deep down, a part of me is like, that knows it's not quote unquote my best, even though it's fine. It's totally, it's beautiful, and I'm grateful to have a voice.
but it's like that part of you that gnaws at you, that knows that you could really be shining bright and give so much more if you were to give yourself that practice and time.
One thing I've really drilled in my brain is that it will always be a work in progress. So like even now you might think about like, I can't wait till whatever that milestone looks like for music wise, whether it's the way you perform, the way you sing, a song you want to write. We think like, just if I could get there, it'll all be great. And then we get there and then we reset the bar again. Yeah. So I've just completely accepted that it is just always a work in progress, which just keeps me so much more open to just like, as long as I'm showing up, like we don't pat ourselves on the back enough for the people that throw themselves out there and are chasing something that they really want. Like that in it of itself takes so much passion and like courage, and like if you're just even in the pursuit of trying to do something that you really want to do,
right,
pat yourself on the back, because most people aren't doing that. And I think another conversation that sometimes people need to ask, which you kind of were touching on earlier, is like, you got to ask yourself, would you still do what you're doing even if you didn't
no one was there?
If no one was there, but also if you never can make money doing it.
Ooh. If
you couldn't make money doing that thing for the rest of your life, would you still do it? And I think that will show you, are you headed down the right path? Is this something you're working towards because you just see dollar signs and you want to make a lot of money doing it? Or is it something that you are passionate about and you're like, even if I don't get paid $1 for the rest of my life, I'm still going to do this thing? So
yeah, and I think a big part too is the whole if no one was there kind of thing, because so much of our lives is put out on social media and that's beautiful, but it's also like checking your intentions, and would you still be doing what you're doing and creating what you're creating if it wasn't just for the sake of validation or what other people might think? So yeah, that's a beautiful thing too.
Very important. Let's get into relationships. We have a lot of men listening to this podcast, so I think they're going to be listening very. I've talked to about relationships with both male guests and female. None of the females have came out yet, but they will be probably more like listening up for. Since this is I think it's like 96% male skewing or something like that. That's at least what Spotify's telling me. A lot of fellas, get your notepad ready, start listening up. So relationships, intimate relationships. How has your past experience been, just at a high level? Are you somebody that, and it may differ from that moment 6 years ago when you kind of started making realizations about your own life and your own decision making. Have you been somebody that has always been in and out of relationships, has had long-term relationships, has been much more just focused on the self-love of you, that you haven't really tried it? Like, what at a high level has your experience been like?
Yeah. Interesting. Juicy question.
I told you, we're touching a lot today. We're hitting everything.
That's amazing. Everything. I love it.
But I think sometimes it's an uncomfortable conversation for a lot of people, but people want to have that conversation as well.
Yeah, it's good. Before I got sober, I don't even want to touch upon that, because I wasn't in touch with my own worth and who I was, and what I allowed into my life was really not great. Because, we set the bar, we set the tone for how other people are going to treat us. So before I got sober, I was in a 4-year relationship in high school, and that was beautiful. And I got to experience the whole puppy love thing, which is amazing. It was beautiful. I watched The Notebook and I think about him, because it's like that puppy love that lives in my heart. And for a long time, I would kind of compare new loving relationships to that moment, to that feeling. Oh yeah, I want to feel that kind of same thing. But after I got sober and I went through my journey of connecting to myself and learning to love and value myself, everything changed. I mean, I don't think I attracted different types of people. Totally. And that's something I like to share with a lot of people, like, people who are looking for partners and things like that. It's like, what are you attracting? And I think a lot of times if we go out and I'm kind of like looking for validation, or I'm looking for somebody, we end up attracting people who are on that same wave, people who maybe aren't whole on their own. So I started to be very conscious of what I was putting out. And to be honest, I wasn't even that conscious of it because I wasn't looking for anything. I was just comfortable with myself. And the first like long-term partner I brought into my life after sobriety, it was the most beautiful relationship ever. And it was someone who was, when we first met, it was like I fell in love with his mind. I absolutely fell in love with his mind. He was so beautifully open-minded and intelligent, and we were sitting there at literally the bungalow in Santa Monica.
Classic.
Yeah.
Classic place.
Hilarious. The last place I ever thought I'd meet somebody, to be honest. But all of a sudden, God. And it wasn't this thing where like, oh, I see you across the room and you're so hot and like blah, blah, blah. Like that thing where a lot of people, humans do, where they're like, they like someone because of what they look like on the outside.
Yeah.
And you know, this guy who I dated was very attractive, but it wasn't about that. We just started talking, and we were talking about books we've read and Eckhart Tolle. We were talking about the nature of free will and if it exists, which is something we kind of touched on earlier. And I loved it because he said to me that he had this idea about free will, that like if I was that person, if I had their upbringing, their biology, I would act like them. And that's the type of compassion that I want. I would love in a partner, someone who realizes that. And so we had this beautiful, beautiful relationship. And there's a lot to go into around that. But I ended up feeling like I wasn't feeling like after a while that I had kind of taken the back seat. And this is like something that's very interesting, I think, about relationships, is that your dynamic with every person is so different. And because he was so successful and intelligent and hilarious, like he shined so bright, and he was somebody who did not jeopardize his own needs. And that was something that was a bit hard for me. Like, you know, if he didn't want to do something, he wasn't going to do it. And I was more of the type of person like, I'll do what you want me to do, you know? And so that I think that there's a balance, but he was so strong with his boundaries, and he really taught me a lot. Like, he's like, anything bad for you in your life, it's gone. He never ate sugar. He literally was so healthy, and he made it cool. Like, people around him were just like, I want to do that too. So it was beautiful and it was amazing. But what happened is that he also wasn't the most vocal about his like feelings towards me, that kind of thing. You know, some guys are just kind of like, oh, you should just know you're great.
Yeah.
But I was kind of like, my love languages might have been words of affirmation, and I want to hear, oh, you look so beautiful today, or this kind of thing. And so I wasn't getting that. And so slowly my sense of worth kind of started to dwindle, and I started to be like, does he even think I'm that great? Or I know that I should fill myself up on my own. But I wasn't really feeling empowered in the relationship. It kind of felt like he's the powerful one. And I was like, oh, cute little Niki over here being cute and funny, but not like this strong, successful woman. And I know that it's my job to take that role within myself. But I do think that there's truth to dynamics and how some people, you know, you might react around them. So it ended up being one of those things where that was where the split ended up happening, is that I really wasn't feeling great within myself, and the certain love languages that I felt like weren't being met. And I had to make a super duper difficult choice to, you know, see if going our own separate ways was going to be better. And the crazy thing is now he's insanely killing it, successful. Like, all of his projects that he was working on
come to life,
have all come to life. He's like famous on TikTok for doing his comedy stuff.
Wow.
Just absolutely killing it. I'm so happy for him. And in the same way, I had to go on my own journey with myself.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm answering the right
you are
kind of questions.
You're doing great.
Okay. And then since then, another relationship, I've had another beautiful relationship since then. And, one that was kind of the opposite, which is hilarious. It was like all that emotional need stuff that I needed met. But like, there's such interesting dynamics with like being completely compatible and then having chemistry. That's my personal opinion. That chemistry is kind of like that thing you can't really explain, and then compatibility is like, do we function well together?
Totally.
And I remember asking my mom, I'm like, is there both? And she was like, I don't think so. And I was like, I think that there is. I was like, I think that there is, though. I think that you can find both.
Totally.
So, yeah, I'm super like, I also think, like I said, we set the tone. And, in this last relationship I was in, I was having a hard time emotionally, spiritually with myself. And so, since that relationship, it was a beautiful, beautiful experience. And I think that sometimes being on your own can allow you to grow in ways that you don't grow when you have that person there who can feed you the love that you're looking for. Mm-hmm. So that's exactly what happened as soon as that next relationship transitioned to a friendship, which is beautiful. And I'm really glad about that. And something I'm passionate about is like, you have someone in your life, and I'm all in favor of trying to keep that relationship. Totally. And we've done a really beautiful job of that. But as soon as that relationship transitioned and I was able to kind of be with myself, amazing things started happening. Like in terms of my career, I started mentoring people and just beautiful stuff. And I've been on like that deep inward journey ever since. So I really do think that it's interesting the people who come into your life at different times.
Totally.
And who you attract.
Totally. I love you fell in love. The sentence that stayed in my mind is you fell in love with this person's mind, because that is so important. Like, I believe that physical attraction is probably going to be something that will pull you into somebody. I think we all, to a certain level, there needs to be some physical attraction, but what is going to make something work and like longevity is going to be the mind.
Yeah.
Are you on the same wave? Like, do you get, like, is the mind
who the person is?
Yes. And so hearing that is exactly what I thought you were going to say, or I just love, like, that's a great way to look at it. And yeah, I think too, and it sounds like just through both of those experiences, it's an interesting thing, because how beautiful intimate relationships like that can provide so many amazing experiences and love and positivity into your life. But then the also other side of the coin is like, what happens to your life when you're just focused on self-love and you're able to just go 1000% on yourself. And, maybe now you're mentoring, or maybe like the music's picking up more now because you have more time to focus in on that. So I just think it's really, that's a really beautiful post-sober path of like kind of what we've been talking about this entire conversation, like being open to things when it's like it happens in your life, and it's like, maybe I should give this some time and energy and see where this goes. But then when things aren't going right, or it's just not maybe the right fit, like having that ability to recognize in that first relationship, like this isn't working, and like being able to step away, that takes a lot.
It does.
Because a lot of people, I think, just get so caught up in their like thing, and they start thinking about the past, like all the things that we've done, and how am I gonna move on from this? And then it's like they should have ended it a year ago, and they're still in the same relationship. And then it's just I see this happen with other people's relationships where it's just like, it's very clear this is not working, that you both need to
comfort. They're stuck in the comfort of it.
Yes. And they're afraid to be alone, which is a whole nother bag of worms that I think a lot of people are afraid of loneliness. And not in the sense of like not being around people. It's the not having somebody to lean on. And like, I think, and you kind of had already said it, but you really got to fall in love with yourself before anybody can fall in love with you, or before you can fall in love with anybody else. 100%. Because if you can't even love the skin that you're in, and the mind that you have, and the things that you have going on in your life, that person it's a Band-Aid. It is a temporary, it could be a temporary person in your life. And then when that person leaves, then you're back to square one. So it's like, you got to put time and energy into yourself and just trusting, not going out looking for it either. I think that's really key.
Yeah. I honestly have always said this. I feel like people are like puzzle pieces, and they either kind of click or they don't. Maybe they click for a certain amount of time and then maybe not anymore. And I think you touched on a lot of great things, like the ability to listen to yourself, like listen to your gut and know what truly is right for you. And even though it's scary, if you're in a relationship, and the easier thing to do is just to stay in it, and you never want to, like my worst fear is like hurting other people. I hate doing that. But ultimately it's going to hurt more if I'm not being authentic. So it's like that ability to listen to what's authentic and not being afraid to be alone, like you said. And it is really crazy to share your life in such an intimate way, and then to go kind of back to just being with you. And there's going to be that period of time where it feels really maybe difficult or uncomfortable. And then I just think there's beauty to both. There's beauty to sharing things with people, but there's also a lot of beauty of being on your own and being able to do what you want to do and not have to consult, really. Not that you know what I'm saying, but just, it's really just you being with you. And I also think that when you do, like you said, love yourself first, you can up level. And like up level meaning what you attract and what you're around. And I've seen it over time, like the partners that I attract, it's like it's all based on me and my relationship with myself. And that's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
It's the energy that you're putting out. You're the journey that you have been the last couple of years. The person that is going to get pulled into your life is exactly the energy that you're putting out there to the world. And, and if it's not, if the wrong person's coming inbound, you're way too aware that it's just not going to get, like you're the sun. You're not going to allow it to get too close. You'll zap it before it becomes a problem or it becomes an issue in your life. Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah, that's really beautiful. Recently, I saw that you were in the audience of listening to, now I'm going to say his name wrong. Please correct me. Is it Sadhguru?
Sadhguru.
I said it right.
Yeah. You got it.
Got it. I just listened to him. I didn't even know who he was until I listened to him on a podcast called Impulsive with Logan Paul.
Yeah.
Very opening conversation. And then of course, the way the world works, we had already had this podcast locked in. And then I think you had reshared a photo that you were like at an event that he had spoke. Right after I just listened to this podcast. I'm like, okay, this is definitely got to talk about this. What was that like? Being in the presence and listening to whatever that conversation was like. Yeah.
So I think that was my first guru like experience, being around an actual guru. And
how would you define a guru? Do we have a?
I've had this conversation with people, and I think everybody has different opinions. I like to be loose with I'm not too rigid and say this person's a guru or this person's not. Yeah. But I would say a guru is somebody who embodies a message, and they embody embody their message, and other people recognize it, and them sharing their consciousness and their heart, it touches people. And so I didn't honestly know much about Sadhguru before I went to this event. So I went in without too much already in my mind about who he was and what he says. And he actually rolled in on a motorcycle, which was amazing. He was hilarious. He just kind of rode down on his motorcycle, took off his helmet, and he came over, and I really loved a lot of what he said. And he told a bit of his story too, about how he had this experience when he was 25, and he started to be able to kind of see what we were talking about, like appreciating nature and things like that. And he ended up going to these deep meditative experiences where time wasn't really a thing. Like at one point he meditated for like 14 days or something, and people had crowded around him and they were like kissing his feet, and he was just like, what is everybody doing? But he explained that, and then everything he said after that was so beautiful. And it was all about how much like unnecessary stress we put ourselves in as humans, and how it really is so simple, like enjoying being alive. And let's see, there was a really funny thing he shared. It was about a woman who had a dream. This is so weird. It was a woman who had a dream, and there's a super hot guy in her dream, and he's just standing there, and she goes, well, what are you gonna do to me? And then the guy was like, I don't know, it's your dream. And that's kind of like life for us.
Yeah.
It's like, this is your life.
Yeah.
You choose.
Yeah.
It's literally your choice how you're going to spend your time and your mental energy and your focus. And so it's all about what you're focusing on and what you're mindful of. And yeah, the different parts of ourselves that we're feeding. And I wrote a lot of cool notes from that. And it was a beautiful experience.
Yeah, it seemed like it was very intimate. There wasn't a lot of people.
Yeah.
It was very low key.
It was like 20 people, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's beautiful. I can't even imagine just being in the presence of somebody like that and the knowledge that they have and the wisdom. He also has a great beard. I don't think I'll ever let myself get to that length, but definitely.
I just pictured it.
Yeah, not ideal, but he's definitely crushing it as a beard legend.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's beautiful. That must have been a beautiful experience.
Yeah, it really was. They asked me to sing too at that event, and it was an interesting experience because it was a perfect opportunity for my mind to kind of, like, part of me wanted to do it, of course, and I was going to do it. But I'm at a place where I'm getting my own personal music together, and I could have just pulled myself up from my bootstraps and just done it. But I didn't feel like it didn't end up working out anyways. It's beautiful that they asked me to sing, and I feel grateful for that. But it was an example of me kind of being in that place of like, do I just show up and do it? Or do I be gentle with myself and say, hey, maybe I'm not ready for that. And that's okay. So
yeah, I think you need to be honest with yourself sometimes too.
Exactly.
Is like, am I not ready for this?
It was going to put me under a lot of stress because I barely play guitar yet.
Yeah.
And so I was going to have to play guitar and sing. And I was trying to pull it together in one day. And I was just like, you know what? It's fine. It's okay.
There's beauty in like the long process of getting good at something, right? So it's like, I try to tell myself that, you know, anytime that I question my own podcasting ability, or if I'm trying to reach out to a guest that is of significant level to society, celebrity, that, you know, they're going to shoot me down, or because I don't have whatever number of followers or whatever it might be. I weirdly like trick myself sometimes and just think how grateful I am because it's allowing me more time to get better at my craft. So
that when that time comes, you're already refined.
I'm already ready for it. At this point, I've done over 200 podcasts. So it's like, I put in the reps where I wouldn't have been ready for X guests had I not done the other 200. You know what I'm saying? So I think like your ability to tell yourself maybe this isn't the right time right now, and I'm okay with that, is great, because other people might see that as an opportunity. It doesn't happen, and then they're in their mind, you should have done it, you screwed up, you're not good, blah 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 blah. But you're
just being gentle with yourself and knowing that all the work you're putting in is paying off.
Yeah, totally. I had read that, and I love this, and I think this really embodies a lot of the things we've talked on today. It was like an Instagram post. I mean, this is where I'm getting all of my information. It's the beauty of the internet. But you had broken down, and I don't know if you had pulled this from somewhere else or if this was from you directly, but you had broken down like the 3 states of change. You called it the ignorance stage is number 1. Number 2 would be the realization stage. And then number 3 was the integration stage. How, is there any advice you would give to people that are going through these stages?
Yes. It is something I just made up. So
that's really good.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well done.
Yeah. So far, Instagram is the only place I'm really putting things out right now. So that makes sense. It's where you're getting everything. But yeah, so that's something that I just drew from with my own experience and from what I've observed with working with other people. And the ignorance stage is, like I said, it's the stage where you're not really aware of the behavior. You're just kind of in it. And the realization stage is you become aware of the behavior, you see it, but maybe you're not able to change it yet. And then the integration stage is I'm actively working to change it. And my advice for this is to just accept yourself where you are in that journey and not feel like you need to be anywhere else. So whatever is showing up for you in your life, as soon as you become aware of it, know that there's probably going to be a period of time where you're still doing it, because the fact is whatever behaviors we're doing as humans, it's serving us in some type of way. So it's purposeful. I like the phrase, like everything is highly organized behavior. So having enough compassion for ourselves to realize that what I'm doing is serving a purpose. And say I have a habit like smoking cigarettes or something that I want to break, or a belief about myself that I can't seem to shake, and I still feel like I'm not good enough, or I still feel whatever. Being aware of it is number one. Congratulate yourself for that. You're aware of it. That's already getting yourself closer to changing it. Then number two, like having that compassion that this is something that's wired in me. It's going to take time. And the more I'm aware of that, the better, because I'm not going to be stuck in the loop. I'm going to be starting to pave new pathways. And then that brings me to the integration stage. It's really those small moments of recognizing, like those little wins along the way. You're just like, okay, I just thought of this, but I'm going to do that. And those little wins, they start to create a new habit, a new experience. And then slowly but surely, you've been able to truly change. And that's something I'm very passionate about is change, and how change is possible. Some people think, oh, they're always going to be that way. I used to have qualities in me that I never thought would change. And like, I used to feel like, oh, I'm so impulsive and I'm irrational and I'm, like at all of these. And I meet people who embody those qualities, who are like, this is just how I am. And I look at them and I'm like, it's maybe how you are right now. But if that's something that you want to change 1,000%, you can change your qualities, because I've done it.
Yeah. I think people get overwhelmed because they start thinking about the big picture of what that change might look like and how much work it's going to take to get there, when you have to bring yourself back in. And I literally preach like small wins. Like that is like my day-to-day method of like, like what are the 2 to 3 things a day that are going to help me better for tomorrow. So like today, a great example would be like, I went and did this workout class. That's a win for me because it's physical health. Number 2, this podcast. Those are my 2 wins for the day. And I'll talk to my parents after this. So that's 3 wins. But like, that's great. Those are the 3 wins. And then tomorrow I'll find 2 to 3 wins, and the next day. But to make those changes in our life, in reality, it's not one big leap. It is small little jumps over a long period of time that then, from a bird's eye view, looks like a massive change, a massive leap. Right. But there's actually a poster that I have out there that's right above my desk that I got about 2 months ago. It's from this content creator named Matt D'Avella. He's actually the creator behind, or the director behind, the Minimalist documentary. Incredible documentary. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's on Netflix. It's beautiful. It's incredible. It's about 2 guys that had it all, money, jobs, and everything, and then some things happened in their life, and then they just dialed back and they got rid of everything. Wow, incredible. But I think the poster, it's still new to me. It says massive leaps are big leaps are of small steps. I forget. I butchered it. Whatever. Right. Anyway, all that to say, it's all about this. What are the small steps that you can make, and change is completely possible. Yeah, it makes massive It can leaps. Feel overwhelming though, depending on what the change might be. Yeah, and I would honestly say I think the secret sauce is compassion. Seriously, like the more compassion I can have for what I'm experiencing, meaning if I'm judging myself along the way, it keeps me stuck. That's what I feel like. Like if I'm like, the compassion is kind of what allows me to move forward instead of being stuck where I am. You made a comment when I had just said, because I said, I go by this 2 to 3 small wins a day, and you said, oh, that's your mantra. And a question that I actually want to ask you is, what is one mantra that you live by? If you had one mantra you had to repeat to yourself daily, what's that mantra going to be?
That's hard because there's so many things. But one that I have in my Instagram bio that I love, and it might sound a little crazy to some people, but that I am the universe experiencing itself. That's that stuff for me, like, that I love. It just reminds me of what I am, that I'm literally made of stardust. Like, actually, that it just puts things into perspective for me. But yeah, there are a lot of mantras that now you got me thinking about just all the beautiful things that we can remind ourselves of. But I think that's probably the one I'll stick with.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's massive.
Thanks.
Is there any area of your life you need to put more effort into?
Hilarious. Every one of them. No. Yeah. Let's see. I would say the whole structure thing.
Really?
I would say, yeah.
You're talking to the structure king, so let me know how I can be of advice.
Oh, Lord.
You have no idea how, like,
Structured you are?
It's ridiculous.
Wow.
But I like laugh at that trait about myself because I know how beneficial it is. Like, my roommates, you ever seen the movie Groundhog Day? Mm-hmm. My roommates, it's with Bill Murray.
In a long time.
Yeah. But my roommates joke, and it's like living with you is like Groundhog Day because your day is the same repetition every single day. And so it helps I have it so structured because it allows me to get things done, and it helps me stay accountable. But
yeah,
anyway.
That's amazing. No, exactly. That's amazing. And something that I'm working for is to create more structure so that I can be more effective in my output into life. But like I said, I think I've been going through this period of reconnecting to myself, to my purpose. And now it's kind of just doing the work, structuring so that everything, all of my goals and dreams can come to fruition. So something I would like to put more effort into is to adding that structure to my life. My life is very unstructured right now, which can also be a huge blessing.
Totally.
Because it's totally up to me.
Totally.
So that's what I'm going to be working on.
I love that. If I can be of any help, feel free to holler, because
definitely going to pick your brain about it.
It's ridiculous how much I just have it down to a T. Are you familiar with We Are Not Really Strangers?
Yes.
Awesome.
We played it literally last night.
Incredible. So what I've been recently doing, I bought the game, and what I do before a guest gets here is I pull a card for them.
Ooh.
And so
cool.
Your card is, are you missing anyone right now? Do you think they are missing you too?
I think I'm missing my sister. Yeah. Her and I don't talk that much, and we don't connect that much very often. So I think that's the relationship in my life that I want to build further. And then her and I are very, very different. So it's been a difficult relationship. I'm sure she would agree if she listened to this. But she's someone that I'm missing and that I'd love to connect with more.
Where does she live?
Denver.
Okay, so not too far from
Not too far. But she's very strict with the quarantine, which is good. But she's not seeing anyone.
Yeah. You had said earlier in the podcast you had a brother and a sister. Is she older or is she younger? Older, okay.
I miss my little brother too. I thought about him this morning, so I think they're on my mind.
Yeah. It's direct relationship with siblings is and its own journey itself of trying to understand and appreciate, like, what does that look like and how often do we communicate. I think just in general, we sometimes could be our own biggest critic of, like, how, like, staying in touch with people, especially like loved ones, and it's one thing, but like just in general, it takes effort and time. Right. And so it's very easy to get caught up in the day to day of like what you're working on, and then you're going to this person's house, and then you go to sleep, and you have all these things you're working on that you're like, shit, it's been 2 weeks or 2 months since I've talked to this person, or maybe it's been 2 years. So I think that can be really difficult at times, but that's beautiful.
Thank you. Do you want to answer it too, or no?
I should answer it, huh?
Do you normally do that or no? Okay.
Are you missing anyone right now? It would be it would be my mom, my dad, and my. I mean, I know it's saying missing any one person, but it would be my mom, my dad, and my sister for sure.
Yeah. Where do they live again?
Both my parents are still in Chicopee, Massachusetts.
Okay.
And then my sister lives in Charleston, South Carolina.
Okay.
Beautiful place. If you ever get a chance to visit, I don't know if you've ever been, but it's actually The Notebook was filmed there.
Really?
Yes. Actually, I watched The Notebook during quarantine. First time.
First time?
First time.
Did you cry?
I honestly, surprisingly, like, and I'll be honest.
You didn't?
I didn't. I think I might have shed a tear. I thought I was gonna be like bawling at the eyes because I'm a very vulnerable person. Like, if I gotta cry, I will fully cry it out.
Yeah.
But I don't know what it was.
Maybe you were expecting it too much.
I think I knew what I was signing up for. That I was just like in my mind. I was like, you don't need to cry. You know what's gonna happen. But it was a beautiful movie.
It is.
But to answer the question fully, it'd be them. And do I think they are missing me too? Yes. And I try to do a better job on my end of maintaining that relationship and reaching out to them. And FaceTime is beautiful. You can still connect with people, and you might not physically see them for a long period of time, but at least the face to face with the FaceTime, you feel something versus just audio if you're on the phone with them. So
yeah, we're blessed for that.
Definitely blessed for that. We have covered so much. Before we finally wrap up, I allow the guest to put a challenge out to the listeners. If somebody has made it this far on the podcast at this point, 2 hours.
Wow.
So if they made it 2 hours on the dot to this podcast, what is a challenge that you have for them?
A challenge I would have for them is for them to try to give themselves a little bit more love and a little bit more compassion. So that might be through writing in a journal, which is a huge tool of mine. I would attribute a lot of my growth to writing in a journal. So maybe I'll even evolve it into saying, journaling and just giving yourself that space and time. But to just practice sending yourself like some loving or compassionate messages, like what you were saying, patting ourselves on the back, like I'm doing okay, I'm doing great.
Yeah.
So that's a challenge.
I love that. Journaling is definitely crucial, just to like put your thoughts on a page and then to even like reflect 6 months later and go, this is where I was thinking, or this is where my head was at.
Yeah, it's cool.
But I think we all can do a better job at giving ourselves that love. Where can people find you on social media, or IG at least?
It's at Niki Cremmen.
Yep.
That's NIKI-CREMMEN.
Yep. I will have that linked up in the bio. If you guys and gals made it this far, make sure you screenshot the episode, post it to your Instagram story, tag Niki and tag me at Bobe, B-O, 3 B's, 4 A's, and a Y, and let the world know why you listened to this podcast, what you enjoyed. It helps grow the podcast organically, and it's very important. But, Niki, to keep it very simple, I will say that, because this has been an incredible conversation, I will say, one, thank you for taking the time to do this.
Course.
For me just sliding through the DM, and you're probably like, what is it? Some random person wants to talk to me, blah, blah. But I think you have a beautiful mind, and I push you to keep sharing your voice through music, through whatever you might post on your Instagram, through podcasts. The world needs more people like you. And so continue to do what you do and keep doing it at the highest level, because it's going to take you to probably some incredible places that you've already seen in your own life. And I just think the world needs to hear from more people like yourself. So
thank you so much.
Keep sharing that message, and I'm a big fan.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Awesome.
This has been great.
This has been a lovely Sunday afternoon.
Yes.
I hope you guys and gals enjoyed this podcast. We will see you soon enough. It's your favorite bearded man. See ya!